Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our first hybrid meeting. Nice to see some familiar faces in person instead of in the screens, and then others in the little boxes there. So we have a pretty full agenda as usual this evening. I want to make a couple of quick announcements before we begin. One is that Chris Fuller, who was a member of our committee, resigned. He just simply did not have the time to continue to participate with us. So he's going to be missed. And I have the pleasure of introducing Arish Gajir, right? Gajir, sorry, who waves people on the screen.
Hey guys, nice to meet you all.
Who is our latest member of the committee, who comes to us with a great interest in transit. And I'm going to give him 2 or 3 minutes right here just to talk about your background and your interest in transit. And then we'll move on to the rest of the agenda.
Cool.
So, please.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ross, and nice to meet you all. I can't say that I've got much experience in transit apart from, as Ross mentioned, just an interest. But my wife and I moved to Alexandria in January and looking to get involved in the community and learned about the Dash bus system, rode it, and was amazed to see that it was a free service and an incredibly valuable service. So as I started looking into it more, I heard about the committee, and that's part of what drove this interest. And that's pretty much it. I'm just, in terms of occupation, I'm an attorney working for an ad tech company based out in California. Was in New York working for another ad tech company until January, and then it's actually until more recently, but was in New York until we moved down here, like I said, in January. So excited to be here, excited to work with you all.
Welcome, thank you.
Other cities?
Brooklyn. Oh, sorry, Alexandria. It's like, the city. I'm like Old Town North, so like just by the power plant that's going to get torn down soon.
Okay, well, let's go to the roll call if we may. Whitney?
Jim Durham.
Here.
Abdel will not be joining us this evening. Arish Gajir.
Here.
Brett Jean. Here. Jason Koenig. Jim Maslenka.
Here.
Matt McManus. Bonnie O'Day.
Here.
Sandy Sainer.
Here.
Ross Simons.
Here.
And Eric Van Horn.
Here.
Thank you all.
Great. Well, this group has heard a lot about the Duke Street BRT concept for going back probably to what, our second meeting, I think, of this group. And now we finally are well into the process. And I want to thank Yvette in particular, who is our appointed representative to the process, and also Jim, who's been serving sort of as an alternate to the process, as well as interested advocate representative from a number of different organizations to the process. So this is really our first opportunity as a group to hear from Jennifer Monaco, who's with us on the screen tonight, about the concept, and use this as a focus group for those who really have not had a chance to participate fully in this process. This really is a welcomed opportunity. I know that Jennifer is probably looking for all sorts of ways for this committee to get into other communities who have not yet stepped up in this process, and certainly welcome your ideas, Jennifer, about how we might go about doing that and assisting you in getting the word out more with deeper penetration into communities that probably have seen some of the signs but really do not know what the process is. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to you, Jennifer, if I may. And you can walk us through and tell us what your expectations for this evening are.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you having me. And thanks again to Yvette and Jim for participating in this process. I would have come out in person over there, but my daughter was just diagnosed with RSV, so I probably have it as well. And you might hear her in the background, so I apologize for that. Yeah, so we're having, we just kicked off the engagement process. I think Yvette is kept you up to speed generally on where things are. I have a presentation. I have the overview presentation today, actually, with a couple additional slides, but wanted to take this opportunity to get some answers to your questions, see what, or get some answers to general questions that we're trying to get from transit riders. And then, yeah, see how you can help spread the word. So I guess just raises of hands, how many people have seen the overview presentation that's on our website? Okay, great. I will quickly go through that, and then we try to leave a good amount of time for me to hear from you guys, and then you to ask questions of me. I'm going too quickly, feel free to let me know to slow down, and I can, yeah, I can answer questions as we go, or wait to the end, whatever you guys prefer. So let me share my screen. So just, I think you all are familiar with this project. It's really about bus rapid transit on the corridor from Landmark, or the West End Alexandria to King Street Metro. But it's more than just making buses better. It's also about looking at the community, about general improvements we can make to the corridor while we're improving transit. And so just as background for folks who may be less familiar, the idea for a Duke Street Transitway started with the 2008 Transportation Master Plan. In 2012, conceptual designs were developed and adopted by council. But since we got funding, and it's been now 10 years since those concepts were approved, we are taking this opportunity to reimagine the design and what the corridor could look like with 10 years of experience. Like BRT really wasn't much of a thing around the country in 2008. So there's lots of new best practices, and then new practices with design, but also wanted to take this opportunity to really work with the community and re-envision what the corridor could be. We're actually in phase 2 of the process. I think you were engaged with phase 1, and just for folks who may not have been aware, I actually just came on to this effort in July. So I was not actually the project manager during the first phase, doing other things with the city at the time. But we heard from lots of folks and really tried to focus on harder to reach populations that don't necessarily come to meetings. And it was also COVID, so we didn't have in-person meetings. But we heard from a lot of people and used and heard a lot, both about, or just here's some key stats. We have a lot more information on our website if you want to get into it further. But almost all, like 88%, said they wanted to see reduced congestion. That was both bus riders and non-bus riders. Almost 50% of respondents said they'd consider riding the bus more often with improvements, which, while that's less than 50%, having 50% of people who took the survey say that they would actually ride transit when they don't now is very significant, or riding the bus even more. And then safety is definitely a big concern with this corridor. So we're really working to address all of these different areas in various ways. And with Yvette's help on the advisory group, they took all this feedback from the phase 1 visioning and developed our project vision. That's really about BRT and multimodal improvements on the corridor. And then we developed these guiding principles to support and help achieve that vision. See a lot of these things throughout city planning processes, but really there's a variety of benefits we can get from the improvements on this corridor, and we really want to be able to use or measure different alternatives against these guiding principles. So I mentioned there's a vision and guiding principles outreach phase. We are currently just starting the concept development phase, and this is the second of 3 outreach phases. Once we get closer to a preferred alternative, we'll be going out again, which will likely be in the spring. So at this point, we're pretty high level, and things will get a little bit more detailed in the next engagement phase. So I don't think I need to tell all of you why bus rapid transit on Duke Street, or hopefully you're all familiar with the concept of bus rapid transit, but really we talk about it as making bus more like rail, to make it more attractive for people to ride. And there's a variety of different ways of achieving that. And there's usually different, a corridor that doesn't need to have all of these things everywhere. There's you can have a corridor with mixing and matching these elements, but essentially working to make a visible corridor with more efficient transit service that's a more pleasant experience. So again, lots of reasons for trying to do this project. The city has some greenhouse gas reduction goals, the environmental action plan. If transit's better, we've seen that more people ride it, and having more people ride transit helps with greenhouse gas reduction goals, improves air quality. There's some equity emphasis areas in the Duke Street corridor, and having transit as a good option makes it more affordable to live in the city. And then the Alexandria Mobility Plan, which was the most recent update to the city's transportation master plan, really focused on providing choices for the community, not trying to force people anywhere, but we want to provide better options so people have a choice of whether they want to sit in traffic or take a bus. And then all these things really help with congestion management as well. I like the graphic on the right. You might have seen it before. If you can fit a lot more people on a bus than in cars. So connectivity is one of the reasons why this corridor is a good place to make transit better. Not only have the West End development, which is going to be a huge attractor on the west side of the corridor, and King Street Metro, which can take you into DC on the east side. But with the West End Transitway, which is another transitway corridor we're working on, you have connections to Mark Center and the Pentagon, and Van Dorn Metro as well. And BRT helps make transit more competitive with driving. Right now, it's twice as long to take transit, and that's not even including transfers or walking to your destination or to the bus stop. So it's about making it just a more competitive option. And when you do that, you see more people who would like to take transit are now able to do so. And then again, just placemaking is another big element of this project. We want to make Duke Street a better place for people to be. So we have different concepts, and in this stage of engagement, we're really focused on the busway, so how the bus is traveling on the corridor, but are also getting feedback on those curb features that help with access and other amenities, green space. And the two together make a concept, but we're really focusing on the benefits and trade-offs of the busway feature right now, because that'll help us refine what the corridor can look like and marry the curb features as we get to the preferred alternative. So we have, there's different ways that different forms that BRT can take. So I talk about sort of high level comparisons between these different ways for bus to travel. And as I mentioned, it can be a mix of treatments in different segments. The corridor we've divided into 4 segments. Sadly, they're not numbered 1 through 4, but one is the West End to Jordan, Jordan to Wheeler, Wheeler to Roth, and Roth to King Street Metro via Callahan, based off the general characteristics of each of the segments. So center running is really the best option for transit. You fully separate buses and cars, but it requires the most space. So Metroway is one example of that, but the center running doesn't need to look exactly like Metroway. There's many different ways that you can have it, with medians, with thinner medians, or without just paint. So that's just one image there. And it also just changes left turns because you are only able to do those at intersections. Curb running, you see a lot of examples of this in DC right now. You have bus and turn lanes. So you're separating some traffic, but there's still some delay because you are dealing with right turning vehicles in those curb bus lanes. And then we are looking at bidirectional as part of this as well. So that's a single lane for the bus in the center, and it'll have hold points so that oncoming buses can hold and pass one another. So that again takes up less space, but there's operational challenges with that we'll need to further analyze if this were to move forward. And then mixed traffic, there are ways to make some improvements in mixed traffic. Station amenities are going to be something in all of these alternatives, but it doesn't, and transit signal priority as well. There's some opportunities for queue jumps, which is small ways for the bus to bypass signals or traffic at signals. But there's generally minimal or more minimal improvements with this approach. So we have broad comparisons of the different alternatives. Actually, should go to this slide. Sorry, this slide first. Yeah, segment 1, we're looking at center running, curb, and mixed traffic. In segment 2, because it's narrower, there's lots of challenges there. We're looking at a hybrid approach of mixing mixed traffic, bidirectional, and center running, as well as a mixed traffic alternative. And segment 2, instead of curb, we're doing bidirectional, again, because of the constraints in that segment. And then for segment 3, we're also looking at center running, curb, and mixed traffic. And just, yeah. So in segments 1 and 3, we'd be taking away a travel lane in order to get the center running bus lane. And in segment 2, we'll be looking at service roads to help find that space. And in any final design, we would be looking at ways to figure out how to make changes to those service roads and still accommodate the general functions that they provide, which I can talk more about later, but I feel like I'm taking up too much time and I want to hear more from you guys. Basically what I talked about, center running, biggest benefit, but biggest impacts. Curb is more moderate, and mixed traffic has less benefits and less impact. So just general trends there. And then curb features, I think most of you are familiar with different things that we're looking at on the curb for bicycling, walking, and green space. And then service roads and provide these access, parking, green space buffers that are valuable for the homes and businesses there. But there are different ways that some of those benefits can be provided without having a full-size service road. So we're exploring that in various sections depending on which alternative will move forward. So I can answer any of your questions, and then I want to have just these up on the screen because we want to hear from transit riders, and we're going to be doing some bus stop chats. Going to get more bus riders, and actually let me. We'll have a lot of pop-ups to help really go to where people are, because we find that in meetings, there's lots of populations that are not able to go to meetings. So we're working on identifying focus groups to small meetings like this to dig a little bit deeper with transit riders, youth, businesses, and then I think for renters and Spanish speakers, we might actually be doing bus stop chats and transit riders as well to get a little bit more. But we had our first focus group last week, and it was really successful. Hearing a variety of diverse voices about their priorities for this project. So just wanted to highlight that. And then we have our meetings here. We have one for each segment, as well as an open house, a variety of ways that people can learn more about the project, in addition to all the materials on our project website. I think there, I'll stop for questions. And if you have any thoughts about any of these questions, I would love to hear them. Can you still see? No, you can.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. Let me just briefly mention that Matt McManus has joined our meeting in person. Welcome. Thank you. So that was a very good overview of the project. We appreciate that. I want to start with individuals who may not have been as intimately involved in the planning so far.
Hmm.
He has a series of questions that he's mailed that are part of the process. So start with somebody like, hey, Jim, can you mute yourself, please?
I muted him.
Sandy, let me start with you. Do you have any particular questions you'd like to pose?
Trying to unmute you. No, actually, I don't have any questions. I do think this presentation has focus. I say focus, gave a better illustration than some of the previous ones we had. I understand this is a work in progress, but I think the variations of the running of the various either curb or center or whatever was a little more illustrated in this. It would be a very good PowerPoint presentation at some meeting where we had users of the bus services to get not only their input, but also maybe answer some questions they didn't even know they had.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And this presentation, most of it is on the website too, with the transcript and recorded.
Thank you. Hey, Bonnie, how about you? Comments?
Sure, I've got a couple of them. In terms of the center, the bus that would run down the center lane, how would people get to that bus stop? I assume you'd have to cross. I'll just say I'm not able to get much out of the slides because of the size of the pictures. But are there like 2 lanes of traffic on each side of the bus lane or 1 lane? And how would a person get across the traffic to be able to catch the bus?
Sure, and I'm sorry about the size. I can pull up some I might be able to pull up some additional slides to show that better. But for center running, you'd have a crosswalk at an intersection, and you'd have to cross basically to the median and access the station that way. So for both eastbound and westbound, you would be walking. You'd be crossing part of the street to get to your stop or to get to where you need to go. But in no direction will you be crossing the entire length of the street. So it's actually a little bit safer to do that because you have a median and you're not crossing as far distance.
Right. So are you crossing 1 lane of traffic then or 2 lanes?
It would be at a signal, and depending on where you are in the it would depend on where you are in the
On Duke Street.
on Duke Street.
Okay. And then how far apart are the bus stops?
So we haven't, there's been some work done for modeling purposes, but we haven't really gotten to the place of talking about bus stop locations yet. I think it was mentioned at the last advisory group meeting that I think the target is about a 1/4 mile distance. So somewhere between where the Route 30 distances are now and the 29 K, which is the Metro bus, which is a little bit more express service. So that's generally what we're thinking, but that'll be refined as we move forward.
Yeah, I don't know how many seniors, live. I mean, I'm talking people who have difficulty walking, and I don't know how that would affect those people. And I understand that it's a balancing act between how close together are the bus stops. So how often do they stop, and how quickly can you get to, where you're going? And this may be a discussion for later on in the meeting. But I'm wondering, what can we do? I've heard and seen a lot of discussion in my neighborhood association and also in some of the, like the Alex Times and some of these other newsletters. And, I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I think there's a lot of negativity from the car owners, particularly there's more people in Alexandria that live in apartments and may not have the luxury of a single family home with a 3-car garage or whatever. So I guess my question is, what can we do to help if we don't advocate strongly and we're the, advisory committee, then, who's going to advocate for this? So I think I want to know what we can do to help.
That's a great question. And for the advisory group for Duke Street in Motion, we shared a little toolkit of ways to help spread the word with social media and some graphics, as well as FAQs about the process, which are actually all on our website as well. So we can share that with you. But yeah, if you feel comfortable with the information that you've been presented, there's again FAQs on the website that can help answer questions and try to address the misinformation. Social media, if you use that, we have flyers. If you have places where you'd like to distribute flyers, we've been trying to hand those out at different places in the community. In addition, as you've hopefully seen, our yard signs. But if you want to write op-eds, just any, that would be helpful. Just helping to, we want to try to get right information out there, because it is unfortunate that there's just a lot of misleading information that people are hearing. So city's trying our best, but it's a challenge. We're also there's no city presence on Nextdoor. So there's just some places we can't reach. But I can share that toolkit with this group. And it has some sample social media messages, but also open to hearing your thoughts on other ways that or things that you would need from us to help spread the word better.
Thanks. I have one more question. Do I have time for one more question? I don't want to dominate too much. Okay. So I took the Route 1 Metroway. Now, admittedly, it was on a Saturday, and admittedly, it was a few years ago, but I was a little surprised that it didn't seem to speed things up a whole lot, particularly going through the Crystal City area. And I also noticed that I don't think there was very many people on it. I might have been the only one. So I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about the success of that Metroway, and if that's a good comparison for the Duke Street Transit Way that you're talking about. And then that's it. Then I'll be quiet.
That's a good question. They're very different corridors. I don't think Route 1 was really a high transit corridor before Metroway was started, and Jim was around at the city, I think, when that happened. But there's a lot of planned growth that still hasn't fully materialized on the corridor. So I think some of the ridership lagging is because development has lagged a little bit more than was anticipated. There's also efforts in both the city of Alexandria and Arlington to expand the dedicated right-of-way available to make buses move a little bit faster through the corridor. So it's still a work in progress and hasn't been fully completed yet. But Duke Street is the most efficient most efficient route on the Route 30 in the Dash network. So they're very different in terms of the starting level of service and ridership. And then I think with the landmark development that's actually moving forward, I think you'll see some ridership gains and benefits sooner from that project. So that's just some initial response to that question. But there's still potential for Metroway, I think, but it definitely doesn't have, I think, the ridership that was initially anticipated.
Yeah, and I did ride the AT8. I used to live over right off of Duke Street, and it was always standing room only. I know that before the pandemic. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie. Eric, do you have any thoughts or comments you want to make? All right, let me move on to Jim Zlanska.
Okay. Thanks very much. Actually, speaking as a person that has been using the Route 30 an awful lot over the last month and a half or so, I can attest that the ridership on Route 30 and on Duke Street is very, very heavy throughout the day. I actually took a Route 30 at like 10 o'clock at night, and there was a standing load coming out of the King Street Metro. So this particular corridor is going to be a really nice corridor for BRT. The one thing that I think that Jennifer and I were working together at the city for a few years, and actually prior to Jennifer coming over here, we were working on basically the bus BRT on the Duke Street. And one of the ideas that we came up with was basically to in the area that's near the Alexandria Commons, that area is really constrained by the amount of right of way you have. And so what our thought was that you would be operating the bus in the curb lane during the peak hour. But what you would do is actually do what's similar to the Ramada does in DC, whereby you use an overhead gantry to shift the travel lanes from peak hour to non-peak hour, so that, say, in the inbound direction or the eastbound direction in the morning, you'd have an exclusive bus lane in the curb going towards Old Town, and then in the evening you would change the traffic flow so that you'd have an exclusive bus lane going to the west. And the current middle lane would actually serve as you'd still have two travel lanes, but you would use that curb lane, the middle lane, basically as an exclusive bus lane. So that's one of the ideas that was thought about. I'm just wondering if that's something that you guys are thinking about in the Duke Street in Motion program, because that strikes me as something that might work out well there, right? Do you have any thoughts on that, Jennifer?
Yeah, so that was what was recommended by council and through the initial working group process back in 2012. And we presented to the advisory group that plan and got feedback. And I think, and just from technical folks as well these days, that's shifting the traffic lanes seems challenging and is something that jurisdictions are generally moving away from. So there was not huge support for continuing pursuing that concept. So given the feedback from the review of the 2012 plan by the advisory group, or from the advisory group, we developed these different alternatives. But that is a creative way to use space in limited right of way. But yeah, that hasn't isn't under consideration at this point. But it is yeah. So that's where we are with that. But if we get a lot of support for new ideas, we could bring it back in the mix.
Okay. Thanks much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Jason, do you have anything you contribute to this particular topic?
No, taking it all in.
All right.
Great presentation. I appreciate it.
Okay, great. Arish?
Yeah, no, thanks a lot for the presentation. Just had a couple of questions. One, just wondering out of curiosity if there's any comparative data from other systems that kind of model out what the impact of ridership is based on which of the approaches you take, whether it's center lane or mixed traffic or the other ones. So just curious if there's any data on that.
So there's there's lots of different studies out there. I think there's been a proven benefit from when you improve travel times and reliability, you see more ridership. So it might depend a little bit on the order of magnitude differences between the two, but generally you'd see higher ridership from the center running. It's, I think, a little bit of an outstanding question exactly what the differential would be. At the meeting next week, and I'll be posting on the website boards of a little bit more quantitative analysis. It's very high level at this stage, trying to estimate the different travel time benefits, but it is also not just travel time, reliability as well as a big factor in getting people to ride the bus. Yeah, that could be a good FAQ, and I could put some specific sources up there. But it's generally more frequent, more reliable service that is more competitive to driving, generates new ridership. So those are the three largest factors, I guess, in all the different different features that BRT has or transit improvements.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'll take a look too on the website once it's posted to try to maybe see what some of that looks like. The other question is, I guess, I know we're looking at 4 zones and there's a possibility of shifting approaches as you kind of move through the system, if I understood that correctly. I'm just curious about what the challenges are, if any, associated with going from one model to another as you kind of transition through zones.
Many BRTs across the country and Metroway uses different running way treatments throughout the corridor. As long as it's not too frequent, generally, it's engineers are able to make safe transitions between the different models. So we've worked with Dash staff as we've looked at these alternatives, and they're very comfortable with having different treatments within at the segment level. The bidirectional hybrid approach, I think, is a little trickier, that we do have to figure out a little bit more exactly how that would work and what the implications of that would be. But at the segment level, it's definitely very standard to do things like that.
Okay, that's great. Thanks.
Matt, any?
Great, yes, thank you. Will you still maintain 2 lanes of traffic on Duke Street on each direction of car traffic?
Yes, I think, actually, I didn't want to go through each of the alternatives in this presentation. It's on the website, and I think there's 2 maintained for each of them. We take away a travel lane for center running in segment 1 and 3, and don't take away a travel lane in segment 2.
So you're sort of service lanes along the route, is that correct? Where are you getting this?
For segment 2, it would be impacting service roads.
Okay. And I also share Bonnie's comment. It would really be hard to dodge traffic and get into the middle of Duke Street. I mean, good luck. I think it was much better to have it by the curb.
Appreciate that comment. But as we're making all these improvements, we'll be looking at intersection safety improvements as well. So it wouldn't be necessarily how the existing corridor feels.
And when would groundbreaking be if approved?
I think the earliest would be at this point around 2025 at this point.
And are you getting Innova Hospital to pay for part of it?
I think they're making a lot of related improvement or supportive improvements. They are not paying. We have funding from the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority to pay for this project.
Or foundation, whoever owns Landmark. Great, thank you.
So before I go to my 2 colleagues here who are more intimately involved, I have at least one question I'd like to ask, which is the benefits that you outline about emissions what are your assumptions on emissions here then? Presumably that means less cars on the corridor, but by what percentage? So let's start with the fundamental question. How many cars are going through the corridor currently? And how many cars are you planning on reducing in the corridor as a result of this plan? Presumably that correlate to overall reduction of emissions.
Sure. Yeah, we haven't quantified this yet. As we get further into the process, we'll be projecting ridership, which we can, I think, develop some proxies to figure out what that could mean in terms of people who shift modes from driving to taking the bus. I think we're looking at between 10 and 30,000 car vehicles per day throughout the corridor. But again, we're not at the stage to project ridership increases at this point, but just direct, like, we're gonna have likely zero emission buses for this service. And with these improvements, we're very likely to see ridership increases. So logically, we'll be going in the right direction. We can't say at this stage by exactly how much.
Okay, thank you. So Jim, I know you have a bunch of questions. A few of them have already been asked by other colleagues of yours. So first, Yvette.
Sure. No question. I just want to speak very highly of Jennifer's leadership in this project. I know it's made possible by riders, residents, business owners such as ourselves. And I think what makes this Duke Street Moving Motion so unique is that it's not a project that the city pushes out and implements by itself. It really takes the time to go through the community outreach and ask for our opinions. So, as advisory group members, we go there with a purpose. We're taking this very seriously. So hopefully, I would love for you to put on your rider hat on and give some feedback in addition to your being residents in the city.
And thank you for your service on this group. I know it was given all your other commitments, it was a bit of a burden on you, but I'm glad that you accepted it. So thank you on behalf of all of us.
Yeah, thank you, Yvette. You've been great. I hope you all have seen her video where she talked about Duke Street in Motion for social media and for council. So I appreciate that.
And Jen, I'll just add, thank you for jumping in. People may not know this project started out with another program manager who prepared for it for 2 years. And then with 2 weeks notice, I think, went to another position. And so jumped in with both feet and done a great job. Thanks. I got it. I'm going to go real quickly. This business of the different segments and a little bit to Matt's comment. It turns out that sections 1 and 3, if you look at the sections that have 6 lanes now, 3 in either direction, that's about 2/3 of the quarter. And so I'm expecting it to make a huge difference just to get dedicated lanes in 2/3 of the quarter.
Right.
I'd like to see it throughout the minute. It's not insignificant, shouldn't be insignificant. Center running versus curb running. I think it depends on your picture of Duke Street, but number one, the city council has an initiative that they brought up separately to change the speed limit to 25, which will help pedestrian safety and safety for everybody. Secondly, BRT stations are put at signalized intersections. Okay. So we're not talking about running to a bus stop. If you think about it today, you have to cross the street of all the lanes. Right. And now you're going to get a pedestrian refuge in the middle at a signalized intersection, which is shown to reduce pedestrian crashes by about 50%. So the center running is better from a safety thing. And it's also better if you think about Duke Street corridor. There are a lot of curb cuts and driveways and businesses. Right. And so the bus, and I'm sure if they run a curb one in the analysis phase of this project, the curb running is just going to be, stopping for people coming in and out of businesses all the time. So I just have that. AM PM, I thanks for Jim Veslanka for that issue. I would say that the concept's evolved because bus ridership today is no longer driven by the commute. And I don't know how much that will ever come back post-pandemic, but what we're seeing in Dash ridership is this all-day service. So the idea of having dedicated in just the morning and evening is sort of not as valid as it was in the past. But I think
That's true.
concept that Jen mentioned, which is bi-directional. This bus goes east, this bus goes west, this bus goes east, this goes west with one dedicated lane. It's just, a 2022 version of what you were talking about, just with the recognition that there's not as much, direction to the commuter traffic as there used to be, and the importance of all-day traffic, I guess is the point there. And last thing I think is the next steps for the project, and this is a little bit more of a question for Jen and the team. My understanding of the next advisory group meeting on November 17th is you expect to come out of that with a smaller set of alternatives from which to do a lot of detailed analysis. Is that correct?
The goal would be November. There's a chance, because the goal would be November. It's possible that we might need a follow-up meeting in December to present all, we'll have to present all the feedback in November and to take two meetings. But that is the goal, and I should have mentioned that earlier, that it's at this point we're looking for ideally two end-to-end alternatives to advance for further design and analysis. So that is the goal.
Is one going to be something like the 2012 version and one will be something better than that?
No, for each segment, the three alternatives under consideration right now are what I've talked about here. It's possible that the advisory group could decide that the 2012 plan is worth pursuing, but at this stage, it should be three. There are two alternatives from center running, curb, and bidirectional, as I talked about here.
And then really for Ross and fellow members of this committee, that with that decision coming up before our next meeting, does this group want to have an input, a letter from the DAC that says, we recommend that, and I don't want to get into design in this group, but some general words like we recommend the one that has the highest likelihood of increasing ridership, and then let the city decide. And that should be included in the analysis phase. So again, their next decision is what configurations to pick for the analysis phase. If we are at least endorsed that we want to best bus ridership solution, something like that. I don't know what other people think about that sort of general endorsement. I don't want to get into, I don't want to ask us to debate center running things for a letter, but
I think, I agree that I think it's useful for us to try to take a position. It would also be very helpful. That's the one thing that we didn't discuss today, which is really what's Dash's position here as well in this process, and how do they see intersecting with this BRT? I mean, my assumption all along, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that Dash would be operating this BRT system. But in fact, is that the case, or is some other system going to be running this?
It hasn't been officially decided yet, but Dash is very involved in this process, and I think there's a desire for Dash to operate it, but it hasn't been predetermined yet. But we've also engaged Ramada in this as well.
Okay. So is there a possibility there might even be a third alternative operator?
That hasn't, not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. So to answer your question, Jim, I think it would be helpful for us to engage with the Dash staff per se, at least have a conversation around this. Maybe we can do this later if we have time. And then come back to this perhaps in a special meeting.
yeah,
Given the timeline.
yeah. My recommendation is we table this discussion for now and bring it back either at the end of this meeting if this time, if we have an answer from Mark, because he's on the agenda.
Right.
Or
Exactly.
But
Okay,
I just wanted to get the issue on the table.
all right. Any other questions or comments?
I did have one more that, and it's just a matter of that I didn't understand it. I think you talked about the center lane where buses could pass each other if they were going, opposite directions, like a bi-directional
Mhm.
way for that to happen. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. So and there's a graphic on the website as well that I can try to pull up, but I'm bad at multitasking. But essentially, likely at state, like before or after a station, there might be a place for a bus to sit while that'll enable an oncoming bus to pass it. And then that hold point, the bus sitting at the hold point will be able to continue once the other bus passes it. So it's one lane, but there's at stations that are like have a median, there'd be sort of enough space for a bus to sit.
So by station, do you mean a bus stop?
Yes. And for BRT, they're usually enhanced stations or enhanced stops that are sometimes called stations.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
This is Sandy. I have two sort of quasi question comments. One is, well, I have I think the center route, there's an appeal to it. We do get snow. It's not, a place where we don't get snow. And to me, yeah, I think the idea would be trying to understand what could possibly go wrong with snow removal. And then in that center lane where you essentially almost halt buses going through there. Now, I'm not talking about a few inches of snow. I'm talking about sort of a once every couple years snow. The other aspect is sort of jumps to something else. Is there any idea on how you're going to get people out of their cars to ride Duke Street versus hiking over 2 or 3 blocks from their house or apartment to catch a bus route? There's a certain amount of cost benefit to people that have cars. In other words, they would rather walk out in the parking lot or in their garage and know that they're flexible as opposed to taking public transit. And if this Duke Street project is only to make the buses go faster without pulling people out of their cars, it doesn't seem to be a very good project. I mean, it's something that's going to have to be addressed, I would think.
All right, so we've seen with the more frequent network, Dash is seeing more ridership just by the nature of having a better bus service and having it be more competitive, provide a more reliable option. So we're not forcing people, but by providing the better service, we've seen bus ridership go up. So that's generally how that would work, but it does have to be competitive with driving to a certain extent. And not necessarily eye to eye, but a little bit better.
Well,
Does that answer all your questions? I think I might have missed something.
well, I understand what you're saying. I'm not trying to argue with you. It would be good to know where those cars go and come from that go down Duke Street, because if they're not within our Dash system, you can take that section and write it off. I mean, I'm sure statistical sampling could come up with some magic percentage there. And then you still have the issue of the people that are within our range of Dash and what their what's their enticement. Because if you widen it, make it faster, and the buses get out of the way, people are probably going to stay in their cars. A lot of people. I mean, why would they? That old bus is in my way. You got that bus out of my way. I'm just going to stay in my car. and bring it in, whether there's a bus stop out front of my house or not.
No, I appreciate that. And I could follow up with you more. Yeah, we're not going to get everyone out of their cars. That's not the intention. But I think and we saw with this the visioning exercise that we did, where we heard a lot of diverse views about what they wanted on this corridor, and we still heard that 50% would ride the bus more often if it provided better service. So that's some data point that is useful to see that there you can get motion.
Everybody together. In fact, if people continue to drive with the regional growth, then Duke Street for cars will be gridlocked. So when you are sitting in your car and seeing the buses flowing freely and moving people, you'll be incentivized to say, gee, I think I'd rather be moving rather than sitting here in traffic. I think that's the incentive picture that I have.
Yeah, and you can get people from the new hospital to the metro or the West End. Sends a good message to OPEC. Well done.
A good question, Sandy. Thanks. Jason.
I guess, so I'm taking a look, granted, if you're at home, you probably don't have a printed copy in front of you, but the advisory committee guidelines. So I guess.
Wait, that's the next item. So.
No,
Okay.
no, absolutely. I'm using it just
Yeah.
as an example.
Sure.
So when it comes to our roles, which there's a A through H,
Right.
when it comes to our primary roles. So each one of those primary roles says something dash. As much as I love the presentation, I'm trying to figure out how it links to our primary role and which one would we pin it to? So that kind of gives us our action that we'd be moving forward with.
Right.
Because this isn't a dash topic.
Well, I mean, this is why I asked the question that I asked, which is this going to be a dash? Because if it isn't going to be a dash activity, it is slightly outside of our guidelines. I grant you that. However, the city specifically asked for our input. Therefore, Yvette has been sitting as part of this process for some time now. And my sense of why they asked that was the assumption that dash would eventually operate, in which case it would fit into the purpose of these. So we're playing a helpful role at the moment on the assumption that this will become a dash activity. So I would put it under sort of future planning activity, which would fall, I think, within the guidelines that are here.
I think it'd be absolutely a positive thing for it to fall under dash because it would keep things tidy and easier to manage, but we would still have the exercise of which one A through H do we pin it to? Because what's not in here is eliminating drivers, cutting down greenhouse gases, like none of that's in here. Like
Right.
which one are we pinning it to?
Well,
Like,
I would say it's several related, actually, if you think about this.
Sure.
One would be C, that providing advisory input to the dash staff and leadership on key decisions, because at some point they're going to be asked to operate this system. So I would say that certainly is one. I would say it would fall under D, identifies customer needs and assesses whether or not these needs are being met by current dash services and policies. So, just those two alone, but then I would go to F, assist dash staff of planning, execution, evaluation of public outreach activities in support of dash decision-making processes, because this is in part also a community outreach activity as well. So at least three of those, I would argue, are within.
I might also add to that just by saying that without getting too bogged down in the language, I mean, the way I read this is the committee's serving the following primary roles, not solely
exactly.
those roles.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably intended as an
I'm
experience.
glad we have counsel here now on this committee. Another reason why we wanted to have them. Anyway, Jennifer, thank you so much for this presentation. It's been very helpful. I hope you found the comments useful for what your work is, and we will try to continue to engage as we proceed along here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll add with that toolkit as well. I can guide you some additional resources to answer your questions. So thanks so much.
Have a good evening. Thank you again. All right, now we will get to the guidelines. I hope all of you have had a chance at least to glance at it very briefly. This is going to be a discussion. This will not be the way this topic will be set up, is that we will have a discussion of concerns or comments. Those I would suggest be given to Whitney, either she'll take notes here, but even afterwards, passed on to Josh, because this really is Josh's document. And because he's in charge of the charter of the committee guidelines. But in terms of background, how we got to this was, and I'm sorry, Jason, you weren't at our last meeting, because part of this came out of the discussion that we had on the question of what this committee's role was in terms of advocacy or quasi advocacy. And there was an extensive discussion amongst those members who were present that felt that there should be clarification of the guidelines. Josh was sitting in on this process. We also brought up the question of composition of the committee, because our concern was that we still have not achieved our goal in terms of diversity, broadly speaking, which is both geographic, gender, ethnicity, et cetera. And we felt that one of the ways that we possibly could do that is by expanding the number of members on this committee to allow us to engage in even greater outreach to find appropriate members throughout the city. So that was one of the other changes here. At the beginning, let me just go through this very quickly, the highlighted part. So one of the things that Josh wanted to make very clear under the purpose section that's highlighted here is that this is not a governing body. It is not related to the Board of Directors. The advice of this committee goes to the general manager and to the senior staff of Dash. So that was not clear from previous iteration of the guidelines, so that was put in. H, under the committee's primary roles, came from a discussion we had in February of last year about city council's action on possibly funding some activities related to Dash. There was a sentiment amongst some members of the committee at the time that they wanted to take a formal action in terms of some sort of an advisory letter going to city council, either by and also to the board of directors of Dash, indicating a position. There were several members who questioned what the appropriate role of this committee was in trying to do that, and whether we had sufficient time, because there was a very short timeline, and the way the guidelines read at the time was we didn't have sufficient time to call a special meeting, notify everybody, et cetera. So we had talked about the idea of perhaps mail voting in certain situations like this, or having the ability to more quickly call an emergency meeting. So that is also reflected in this interest as well. I'm getting ahead there slightly. Let me just keep going here. So under 3.3, we change the composition of the committee from up to 17 members. That allows us more flexibility. In terms of term limits, Josh felt it was important that present members seeking to remain on the committee express their interest both to him and to whoever the chair is of the committee about their staying on. We also clarified under 3.5 bullet point C about the question of who could be removed. For those of you who were with us from the beginning of this journey, there were a couple of members who were actually listed who never showed up for anything. And we needed a better mechanism to remove those individuals and clarify the role for doing so. So that was what that section related to. 4.2 In section D, this speaks directly to the issue that arose in February, which was how do we deal with advisory letters representing positions that this committee felt are important. And that is then further expressed. So you can take a look at that language. And then 4.3 speaks to the point I made earlier about when it is deemed urgent for the committee to get together for a particular issue. And it outlines a process here for doing so. And then 4.5 further illuminates this issue about information that should be advertised on the DASH website related to this committee and how we deal with that in terms of an emergency situation. And then finally, Josh felt there should be some sort of parliamentary procedure. He chose Robert's Rules of Order, which I had to go back and look at again, just to familiarize myself again with that. And those are the basic changes that have been suggested to the charter. So I would open it up to comment right now around the committee. Arish, you're looking at it from a lawyer's eye. I can see that already, that glint in your eye. Whitney, for just as a matter of course, did this go before your lawyers to have a look at before Josh put this out, or was this just Josh's changes based on our discussion?
He didn't specifically mention that it went to the attorney, but I would be surprised if he did not forward it to him first. But I will confirm with him.
Okay. So anyway, let me open it up. Comments?
I'd love to go first because I want to say first, thank you. Really appreciate, just from my perspective, and I'm not a lawyer, and I don't play one on TV. I really appreciate the language updates, and it's just so much easier for me. It's clearer and more understandable, and I appreciate that. The one and only outlier that I have, and I've gone through this a few times, is I guess the composition part. So coming from the old days of 3 and 4, that routes 3 and 4. So I go to the Pentagon, I go to the Mark Center. Right. So one of the allures of joining this team, I'll call it a team, right? Early on was I was representing the riders in my area.
Right.
And so now Whitney, maybe you know this answer, Ross, maybe somebody in there. Did we come up with 9 originally because there was 9 routes? Or was that just a number that magically appeared? And I'll ask a question before I start talking again, but I don't know where 9 came from. And
I'll have to defer to the staff. I do not know the answer to that.
It was not based on the number of routes.
Okay, so here's my thought is, ridership, is on those around those routes. Do we track whether we have representation from each one of the routes? Like, is that a priority to have people representing the routes, not just, the community in general? And I guess that'd be something I would put out there. I mean, it's great to have more people, but is it more people from each one of the routes? Do we track that? Do we care about that? Is that a priority?
So it is a question on the application, whether or not you are a rider and what routes you ride, but it's not necessarily a determining factor. I think what we want to make sure that we're doing is including all of the communities in the area, not necessarily specifically the routes, because that could change based on if you get a different job, that kind of thing. Sure. So I think what I've been most focused on are the different areas within the city, not necessarily the routes that people ride.
Other comments? Anybody want to? Okay, Yvette, please.
Just some 3 questions. First of all, I don't think it mentioned anything about electronic participation. So I'm curious how that will integrate into the guideline. Second is sort of related, is quorum based on people physically assembled at this location? And the third, can you remind me if special meeting count towards the attendance for
Let me take your questions in order. So quorum. Sorry, the second one was, I got the, electronic.
Yes.
And the third was
Is the special meeting.
special
count?
meeting count as attendance. Okay. So it's a very good question about quorum, because that is something that we did talk about at the meeting, and I guess we didn't get it reflected in this, did we? So we need to go back and look at that again. The idea, at least expressed at the meeting, was a quorum of those present, whether they were physically here or in a hybrid situation online. So that, in a sense, speaks to the electronic piece, which again, probably should be reflected. Whitney, I think that's absolutely right, which is the thing of hybrid. I don't know how to answer the special meeting, whether that counts towards attendance or not.
That is not something that we had previously discussed. And Yvette actually asked me that prior to the meeting, and I thought it would be a good discussion to have with the group because it's not specifically stated in the guidelines. So I thought that would be a good discussion for the group, and then if that determination was made, then I can add it to the guidelines and re-present it to Josh.
I'll speak from my viewpoint and then let anybody else please speak, which is, I don't want to abuse the concept of a special meeting. I think it really should be something that reaches a threshold of importance, either in terms of the actual issue at hand and or the timing of the issue, right? So I kind of feel like a special meeting should not count against attendance. We should encourage attendance in some way. There, as you recall in here, there is a mail provision as well. So that's just another way, it seems to me, to be able to get the information in a more effective way. But I, for one, would say it should not count towards the attendance quota, if you will, that's in these guidelines. But I'd like to hear other people's opinion.
I agree with you. I mean, I think, I don't know what the cadence of special or the regularity would be, but it feels like, they're maybe hard to predict, maybe, don't really have much else to add.
Yeah, when I read paragraph 3.5B, that's the way I read it. That's the way I read. This is more than 50% of regularly scheduled meetings. So it's already addressed in here. That's the intent. Unless.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
I agree as well. Obviously, like I don't know, none of us would know what the contents of a special meeting would be until it actually happens, but I suspect it would be about a specific topic rather than a whole list of topics as well that we typically cover in a regular meeting. So.
Great, thank you, Eric. Anybody else? So Whitney, if you could carry back to Josh these changes, and assuming he finds these acceptable, we will send them out again for one last look at. But really, this is Josh's decision because he's essentially setting the rules of engagement here. He's asking for input. I think we've gotten the input that's necessary here.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I didn't realize we were closing the discussion. I thought we were still talking about the special
No,
meeting.
please.
So if it's okay, I just had a couple.
Go ahead, please.
Sorry. So one on, I think it's on 2H. The way it's written is a little confusing to me, or maybe it's just, I don't know. It just occasionally takes formal positions on key issues with the Dash customer as top priority regarding Dash service funding and operations. Just what is the intent there, that we're helping identify what the top priorities of Dash customers are to the Dash staff for prioritization? Is that sort of what the intent of that is? I'm having a hard time
the
understanding
intent-
it. Sorry.
The intent, I think, here was that it should be read as taking formal positions with the Dash customer as top priority, pause, regarding Dash service. It's probably not elegantly drafted here.
Yes, I agree, both with this comment and yours. And my suggestion is occasionally takes formal positions on key issues regarding Dash service funding and operations to help decision makers consider the impacts of their actions, comma, with the Dash customer's top priority.
Yep.
Need to just move that
I like
phrase
that. I like
to the
that.
end.
Did you capture that, Whitney, or do you want Jim to give it
That
to you
was a
later?
little fast for me, Jim.
Okay.
One more time, if you please.
The phrase with the Dash customer's top priority,
Mhm.
I would put that after the word actions at the end, and I put a actions comma.
So beginning with regarding Dash service. So the sentence would begin with regarding Dash service?
No, the sentence would go from key issues regarding Dash service.
All right, can I suggest?
I
you-
can- I'll
you'll
write-
write that
I'll
out
do that
and
on
send
Monday.
that to Whitney. Great, thank you. That way,
I'll do it all.
we'll make sure that we got it absolutely right. Do you have another
I
thing
think it was
you wanted to
great.
mention, Rish?
Yeah, I just have a handful, so sorry, I'll just quickly. So on 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, we talk about how do you apply, what's the composition of the committee and term limits. I think what's implied in here, but may be good to clarify, is how acceptance takes place. I think it's completely at the discretion of Josh, the GM. But I don't know if it's both you, chairperson, and the GM. I just think it would be helpful maybe in 3.2 to say that, acceptance is at the discretion of whoever or whatever that approval process is. I think it may be implied, but it's just not called out, at least the way I read it.
Okay.
And then on 4.2, we talk about, I think it's this language that was added in D at the very bottom. It's the chair shall also inform the Dash GM or external body of any significant dissent by a DAC member. I just don't know whether we as a committee would want, if somebody's dissenting, that to be noted in the communication, or maybe the person's name who's dissenting to be left out somehow, so that it's not, hey, this is the public recommendation maybe of the Dash committee on this particular issue. But maybe somebody objects and again, just don't know if we want that noted.
I'm sorry, so this question is whether or not their name would be included?
Yeah, or I guess excluded or noted as somebody who's abstaining. So the way it reads is that the chair would inform the GM that a particular member or members dissented. But I guess in the recommendation that's actually made, if it's a written recommendation, I don't know if we want to say, yep, here the committee approved it, but this person abstained.
Well, I don't think the intent was to name the person per se, but it was in fact to denote dissent.
Mhm.
If it was obviously
Yeah,
an important issue. And I guess the question we didn't get totally clarified, I think about it, is does the letter come from the chair and therefore it's only one signature on it, which would be sort of on, so the letter would say, the Dash advisory committee met, they discussed blah, blah, blah. They made a decision and make the following recommendation. One member dissented in this initiative, whatever it happens to be, sincerely yours, right? And I guess it would be up to the chair or the vice chair to be the signator of the letter, but it wouldn't have everybody's name on it necessarily. But, people can look that up. It's easy enough, figure out who's on the committee.
so I've come across this as a member of a civic association board, and I have an issue if the civic association board takes a position and then says, this board, this civic association says X, but in fact, it took a membership vote and it was 51 to 49. And so I think the intent Josh has here is, you know, if there is more than one person who doesn't agree with the majority, so the motion's passed on a majority, right? So we could have, you know, a 13-member board, you know, 7-6 split, and so the motion would vary theoretically, you know, by the rules. But I think it would be fair, and I'll take the example of the chair signing a letter on behalf of the board, you know, a majority recommended X on a vote of 7-6 or something, you know, so it informs the decision maker of just how solid this is. I think it's greater transparency. That's kind of the way I read this, but it's a great question.
Yeah, and I guess the only, that totally makes sense. And I guess the only question would be like, let's say you have a strong dissent. Should you as a DAC member be able to say, hey, you know what, I want it noted in the communication to the Dash management that I, you know, Jim, sorry, dissented. So in the written document, and it's just a question that are out there. I mean, I don't know if there's that much controversy, but should we have a mechanism as individual members to say, hey, you know what, like I want my dissent noted in the written communication? That's really, I guess, where my question is.
I don't think so, because we're not really subject to the rules of FOIA. We're not like a city council committee. We don't have minutes that say who voted one way or the other. I think that would be, I like your idea, James, of transparency, like 7 to 5 or whatever. But then anonymous, you know, I mean, we're just citizen volunteers of a committee, you know, advisory committee, and we're not a board, so.
Other feedback? All right.
Okay, and then just the last thing I had was, on special meetings, you know, it says that the meetings, can only be called with the concurrence of the staff committee liaison. And I just was wondering, as an independent committee, I guess why we would need approval if we wanted to have a special meeting. Should we just be able to call one, you know, no offense to Wendy, but
Very legitimate question to ask.
I wish I had a response to that. Again, I did not create that section,
Well, could you note that?
but I will
that-
make a note.
Could you note that perhaps we strike that phrase? And we're not suggesting we're gonna go rogue, but it's just a question of clarity.
I'm guessing Josh would have written it in there because when he's gonna send out the announcement, and she's
Exactly.
gonna host a Zoom meeting or whatever, and so it doesn't support her schedule. It's just a challenge, but it could be struck as well, I think, and still.
You know what I would say? Here's what I would do. Why don't we just strike the term concurrence and just put in with the coordination
Coordination, yes.
of the staff committee liaison?
Yeah.
Will that be acceptable?
yeah, sounds good.
Everybody? Okay, take care of that quickly. All right, anything else? Okay, thank you all. We will get this back to you for one last look. But again, I just want to reemphasize, this is Josh's final, you know, decision. We can advise, but he will dispose of at his discretion. All right, we've now.
I was
Go
just
ahead.
gonna say, would it be possible to have the information on, going back to my question about representation of the routes?
Right.
And I understand, again, I respect and understand the focus is on the community, but could we at least have that transparency of who's here representing what lines? Only because if there are gaps, I think that should be something that we talk about or think, not just completely excluded. You know, I think it'd be helpful. So, but I don't know what I'm looking at either, so I'd have to see the data. thank you in advance if that's possible.
Thank you. Go ahead, Eva.
I think, 3.3B, it says it should be the effort of Dash and any current committee member to ensure that whenever possible, membership in the committee is diverse and representative. I am just curious how, whenever possible, what does that entail?
That means we encourage everybody sitting around this table and on the screens to work very hard to ensure that we have full representation of the communities, the gender, the ethnicity, the economic status, et cetera, on this committee. This has been a struggle, I will tell you, because we've tried very hard, for example, to get a Latino or Latina to serve on this committee. And this has been going to council members for assistance, going to the city staff, going to Dash. And so far, we haven't been able to do this. And to me, I think that's a major failure. We also, with resignations that we have, are down in terms, frankly, of gender. This is still looking a little male to me. We need to think about improving that. And then there's just the question of, do we have the right economic equity of the writers that are represented on this? And Whitney and I and Josh have talked ad nauseum about this issue, because obviously some people that are in a position of underrepresentation actually don't have the time to serve on a committee like this because they have to earn a living. And we're cognizant of those issues as well. But the aspirational goal is to try to include all the communities that ride this system in some fashion with greater representation on this committee. I think that's probably the best way to sum it up. Does anybody take issue with that aspirational goal? And we will continue down that path. And now, Martin has been waiting patiently to give us a service planning update. So we will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ross. Everyone. I'm excited to see that we've got a great turnout in person. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you this evening at family engagements, but I do extend our gratitude for your time and taking an evening out of your day or evening out of your life, your busy lives. So I have a couple Dash planning updates to share. I'll keep my remarks brief since I know the hour is getting a little bit late. Let's see if I can, there we go. So the first item here is the Ramada Updates. And are you guys hearing me okay? Can I get a thumbs up, Whitney? Or okay. Looks like my internet looks pretty stable. So the first update is, as many of you heard, Metro had some updates last week that were a little unfortunate. The shutdown of all Alexandria stations will be extended by 2 weeks to November 5th. So unfortunately that will continue. It doesn't have any direct impact on Dash service, but obviously a major impact on Dash riders who will continue to have to use the shuttles instead of the rail, which is really unfortunate. We're trying to get people back onto buses and onto transit. So very, disheartened by that, and happy to see the city has had a strong response. Potomac Yard Metro also was announced it was not be opening this calendar year. We had previously hoped it would be November, December timeline, but now it's looking like it won't be until sometime in 2023. So the major Dash impact as far as that goes is that we had a series of service changes that were going to be tied to that station opening. Specifically, there was realignments of line 33, 34, and 36A and B that were going to be made to better serve, better connect to that station. And all of those changes will obviously be delayed until we have an opening date for the station. So just some impact there for us. Any questions on the shutdown or Potomac Yard Metro?
Other than, do you assume that date's going to slip even further?
Yeah, I don't know. They gave a pretty wide window with 2023, so hopefully it doesn't slip any further than that. I mean, we're still anticipating, we're still gearing up for first quarter of 2023 and keeping our fingers crossed. But they're obviously seeing some challenges on the construction and with the contractor. So it's hard to say.
So you also would assume that the shutdown probably will extend beyond November 5th.
Oh, that I don't know. I really hope not.
Okay. Thank you.
Obviously the second phase will continue beyond November, but the first phase, yeah, it's hard to say without knowing what the problems are and if the contractor is heading towards resolution.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Sure. Okay, well, next item I have here is dash service changes. We've got a couple service changes queued up for October 23rd. We haven't had any service changes in quite a while, actually, nothing major since the new network launched over a year ago. But we do have a few lined up. The biggest, as you will recall from our TDP process in the spring, we were able to secure funding. City Council provided additional funding for our Line 30 improvements. And those included extensions of weekday peak trips. Half the trips on the 30 currently end at, they don't go into Old Town, they stop at King Street Metro and turn around during the peak periods. So that practice will no longer continue. All trips will be extended into Old Town and around to Braddock Road, which will be a big win for connectivity, especially for Duke Street riders. We're very excited about that. The 30 will also be extended on weekends. Currently, it only runs every hour between Landmark and Van Dorn Metro. So the South Van Dorn Street corridor only sees a 30 once an hour on weekends. That will change to once every 30 minutes. No more short trips that way on the weekends. So better service for the Duke Street, better connectivity. So we're really happy about that. And then we also have some running time adjustments on a few other routes, including the 30, 31, 32, and 35. So those will go into effect Sunday, the 23rd. Any questions on those? Okay. The last item that I have here is a preview of a new set of dashboards that we have been working on for the last better part of the last 6 months, I'd say. This is kind of in the interest of increasing our transparency and accountability. We wanted to have a set of performance metrics that we could report internally, but also to our board, to the DAC, and to the public. That we could kind of update every month to see how we're doing. So these are monthly dashboards. There's going to be a series of 6 of them. I'll be sharing the first 3 of them tonight, and then we'll have the remaining ones probably for the next meeting. But these are going to be updated every month. We'll be posting them on our website. We'll be putting them in our board directors packet. We can certainly share them with DAC. We'll be discussing them at our senior leadership meetings, and we'll have them posted on TV displays. If you've obviously been in the facility, most of you, so we have displays throughout the facility, and we'll be putting these up on those as well, so that the employees have some awareness of how we're doing as well. So the 6 dashboards are listed at the bottom there: ridership, reliability, safety, customer service, HR recruitment, and finance. So those are the 6 that we've focused on for now. That may evolve, but that's what we've got for now. And the 3 that I have tonight are safety and security, customer service, and ridership. So the first one is safety and security. This one really focuses on events, which are defined as collisions, passenger incidents, property damage incidents, employee injuries, or other safety-related occurrences. So we're trying to track these on a monthly basis to see if there are any trends that need to be addressed. We kind of have just a couple metrics here, just preventable events, total events. We compare those numbers to the previous month. And then we also standardize those based on the amount of service, which is the events per 100K miles. So you can see that it's been fluctuating a bit, but we are usually kind of around that 10 events per 100K miles and about 2 to 4 preventable events per 100K miles. There's not really an industry standard for this, but we're going to kind of continue to monitor this and compare it against ourselves. Just to make sure the trend is not increasing. So those are the events, and then we also have refresher trainings down at the bottom. For existing operators, we will do refresher trainings. Unfortunately, we've been kind of short-staffed in our training department, so we haven't been keeping up with these until August, but we'll continue to track those and see what direction it's going. The next one is customer service. This one has a couple different things. First, there's an index that we've developed called the Customer Satisfaction Index, CSI. It's a scale of basically 0 to 100 usually. where we look at the number of complaints and commendations that we receive each month, and there's a weight assigned to each one. It's a little bit higher for commendations. I should say commendations are a positive value versus while complaints are a negative one. So the more complaints you get, the lower the score goes, and commendations will bump it up. And one commendation is worth a little bit more than one complaint, so it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. But we got the index here. Anything above 80 is usually a good month, and we have been above 80 barely, but for the last 5 months we've been above 80. So we'll keep an eye on that and continue to track our performance. In terms of actual complaints, you can see that we've got 7 valid complaints in the month of August. The average resolution was 4 days, which is faster than it was for the previous month. We got 3 commendations, which is a little lower than we got the previous month. And then the valid complaints per 10K boardings, again, that's measuring the number of complaints against the total riders. If you have more riders, more boardings, you expect there probably more complaints. So it's trying to normalize the statistic a little bit. And you can see that it has been trending down in the last few months. So that's a good sign. And then finally, we just have some complaints by type. We have our 3 most common complaint types are schedule adherence, unsafe driving, and stops. So we've tracked those separately, and then we have another category. It's kind of a catch-all, but that includes a number of different things that I used to have a list down at the bottom, but I guess it's not there. Anyways, that's the customer service. I'll pause there for a second before I get to ridership, because ridership's a little more involved. But any questions on the first 2 items or KPI reports in general?
Hey, Martin, Jason, I just want to say thanks. I love metrics. That's my thing. So as we accumulate data and we take a look at it and we figure out this is all lagging, obviously, but when we start to take a look at leading, it's what a great opportunity for this organization, because we have measurables right there when it comes to safety, reliability, and soon to be ridership, and being able to inject ourselves into how can we help with this metrics. I love this. This is great. I mean, a lot of things we talk about are theoretical or idealistic, but this is hard data. So hey, thanks, Martin. This is great stuff. I call it action candy. So thank you.
I love the data too. It makes our decisions so much easier to kind of justify and kind of, especially when it's it's positive, but certainly we have a few things we need to work on, and this helps identify those as well.
Martin, how do you make a complaint or a commendation? Is there a website or email or?
The majority of our complaints come in via phone. We have a customer service hotline. So we get the majority of the complaints you see here are through that. We do get some on social media, but the majority are by phone. And actually, I think Whitney, do we have a page on the website where you can submit comments, or we just have the email?
Yes, email is an option too. And
Email, right?
There's an option on the website.
Right.
Thanks for showing us this data. Just curious about the last dashboard on the events or incidents. I think it was per 100K miles per month, right? Just curious, like how many total miles do buses drive on the system every month approximately?
Oh my goodness, that's a great question. I think, let me think, there's about 20,000 hours, and I think about 10 miles per hour. So I think it's in the hundreds of thousands. So we're talking about, I guess you could also extrapolate it this way: five preventable events in August, and we had about 3 so that's about 300,000 miles. So that sounds about right to me. 200 to 300,000 miles per month.
So we would multiply the number of events and preventable events by let's say 3x or something like that. It'd be closer to, let's say for August, like 30 events. Am I reading that right? Just so I understand.
So we had 27 events in August. So yeah, it's about 300.
Got it. Okay, so that's right. Okay. Great.
Okay, well, I will skip to the ridership dashboard, and I have one more graph after this ridership, but this is a really good one that kind of just, as we know, the new Dash network and the Alexandria Transit Vision Plan identified ridership as one of our really the top goal that we're trying to achieve, and we've been able to see a lot of success in that regard. So you can see on the left side we have just our average boardings for weekday, Saturday, and Sunday. So we're averaging close to 14,000 boardings on a typical weekday, which is twice what we saw in August of 2021, which was the last month of the old network. Also have doubled on Saturdays and Sundays, where we're up to almost 10,000 Saturday boardings and just over 7,000 Sunday boardings. So weekend ridership has gone up. You can see those same numbers on a month basis over the last 12 months. So you can see weekday, we took a little dip in January and February due to Omicron, and we had a service reduction for that. But beyond that, we've definitely seen a strong upward trend for both weekday and weekend. You can see the numbers by route. Line 35 is our by far our heaviest route. The line 30 is second, but it's well behind. And then boardings per revenue and trolley, I should say trolley is about 35,000 boardings. We kind of track that as well. And then total boardings per hour, 15.3. That's up by 76% from last year. The boardings per revenue hour is a stat that compares ridership, but also takes into account the amount of service you're running. If you're running twice as much service, you would hope to get more ridership than what you had before. So it kind of takes that into account, but it's good to see that that's also up 76% from the old network back in August of 2021. Yeah, that's the ridership dashboard, and I'll come back to that in a second if there's any questions. But the final graph is just, I think you've seen this before, but this is our last 4 years of ridership by month. As you remember, the blue line FY20 is when Omicron hit us, and then we hit a cliff there. We stayed flat in FY21 due to COVID. I just say Omicron, COVID, and then FY22. You kind of saw this trend line in the last graph, but a strong growth across FY22, aside from the dip in January and February due to Omicron. And then FY23, we've got the first 2 months of FY23, and we can see that we're even above where we were in FY20 before the pandemic. So really heading in a good direction in terms of ridership. It's really remarkable. We're really happy to see this as a result of the new network and free fares. I'll end there. Happy to have any questions or discussions you guys might have.
I'd like to ask two questions, and one I asked Whitney earlier, and I think she sort of deferred until I had a chance to talk to you, which is the ridership survey, which of course is of great interest to this group. When are we going to see the results? And how do we characterize that?
Yes. I'm glad you asked that. So we are actually going to be presenting a very preliminary report to the board next week. We've been having some challenges, to be frank, with the survey. We had a really severe attack of bots. We were able to kind of catch it after the first week or so with some additional security features, but there was a lot of spam surveys that we had to filter through in the thousands quantity. We're finally gotten to the point where we filtered through it, and now we're able to kind of do some analysis. We've got just a very high level summary to share with the board next week. I was hoping to have it ready by tonight, but it's not. But I'll be happy to send out the information to Whitney. Can pass it along to this group to kind of give you guys a quick snapshot of the riders that we've gotten. I know that'll be helpful for some of the discussions you just had on board composition and demographics. So certainly that'll be useful, and we'll share that with you. I would also note that we are planning, that we're planning to have a much more comprehensive ridership survey in the spring, which is a requirement of our FTA for our FTA requirements. So we'll have a much more robust survey in the spring, but we wanted to do this to at least get a sense of who's riding Dash and how their ridership has changed over the last year.
So what's your sense of eliminating the bots? What's the number of respondents?
I think we're going to come in a little under 1,000, probably in the 800 to 900 range. And that's kind of ensuring that all the responses are valid. So, yeah.
Okay. Second question, where are we with labor negotiations? And what's it looking like in terms of effect on costs for the organization moving forward?
Right. So we had signed a 4-year contract, which expires June of this coming year, June of 2023. So we are kind of just in a holding pattern right now. We're starting to have some discussions, but nothing too serious yet. It's really up to the union to start that process, and So we'll be communicating with them and looking to start that, as soon as we can. And make sure that we're accounting for that, at least making sure that the board and you and city council are aware of the impact that might have on our FY24 budget.
Thank you, Martin. And
Sure.
then the final question really relates to the earlier agenda item for us, which was the Duke Street project. And Jennifer's answer, which was of uncertainty as to whether Dash would actually be operating the BRT, or would it be Metro, or conceivably something else. So what is the position of Dash in terms of wanting to, or insisting on, or whatever you want to put around it, the BRT system?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for the question. I think, as Jen mentioned, we've been closely involved in the process, helping provide our technical support, and especially when it comes to bus operations, under the assumption that, there are going to be Dash buses on Duke Street for the foreseeable future, and presumably they will be running in whatever conditions come out of this project. But in terms of the enhanced service for the BRT, I think we're certainly pursuing that, and that's something that Dash would want to do. We want to step up any way we can to serve Alexandria. So we would definitely want to pursue that. And I think there was there also a question about the Dash kind of perspective overall on the configuration? Was that what I heard?
Yes, that was another question.
Yeah, and I guess to weigh in on that, obviously staff wants, and I'm speaking strictly on behalf of staff. The board has not, I don't think they weighed in formally yet, but I suspect they may. But from staff's perspective, we're looking forward to seeing what comes out of the visioning phase that they're going through right now, and seeing what the community is envisioning for the future. But speaking on a staff perspective, from a bus operation standpoint, the dedicated lanes are critical for congested corridors like this, and specifically center running lanes are the best circumstances for buses to operate in if you're trying to make it more attractive, faster, more reliable, and safer. So by our metrics, by the Dash metrics, center running is and if you ask any transit planner, they'll probably say the same thing, that center running is the gold standard when it comes to bus operations. But certainly there are a lot of constraints on this corridor, in terms of right of way and community desire. So I just want to make sure I caveat that strictly from a bus operation standpoint, the center running lanes are the best situation.
Martin, could I ask how are your electric buses doing? Are you working through some experience with them and range on 395 and those things?
Yeah, the electric buses are doing well. We've got 14, as I think you guys know, including 4 60-foot Arctic electric buses that have been coming in handy with some of the crowding we've seen. So they've been running well. We are in the midst of completing a implementation plan, phase 2 of an implementation plan, which outlines kind of our next steps for the next 10 years, basically 10 plus years, in terms of how aggressive we can be with switching over to fully electric. As you guys probably know, our goal is to be 100% electric by 2037. So we're trying to work towards that. But in the near term, the performance of the electrics has been good. We have had some challenges, especially during the cold months, in terms of battery range, but not to the extent that we're overly concerned about it. I think it's been overall very good. The operators have provided positive feedback, and I think overall the customers have as well.
Have you thought of putting solar on your roof? Do you charge in here?
I think that has been discussed at one point, but I don't think that's currently in the plans for the facility expansion. I think that would be a later phase if we were to pursue that, like on the parking deck or something.
Maybe I'll ask Ross, could we get a tour of the facility at some point?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can definitely arrange that.
Martin, this is Jim Eslanka. How you doing?
Hey, Jim. Good to see you.
Good to see you. I got a question for you. I've been riding Dash quite a bit of late, and I'm actually noticing that since the we're doing fare free, there are a lot of people that are entering the buses out of the back doors. Now, are your ridership counts coming just from front doors or are from both doors? Because I think that you really have to make sure that you're getting a count from both doors, because in some places you have a lot of people that are coming from the back doors.
Yeah, thank you for the question. That's a great question. So we did about 6 months ago switch our policy to all door boarding. Since we're fare free, we just want to get people on the board bus as quickly as possible and not have a line, whenever we can. So we did make that switch about 6 months ago, and I think it's been going well. In terms of the ridership counting, the operators are instructed to count. We are still to some degree relying on manual operator button pushes of the fare boxes. So they are instructed to count all passengers on all doors to the best they can. A lot of them will count them as they're pulling up to the stop. So they're not like trying to, look in their mirror or trying to figure it out. But as they pull up to the stop, they'll kind of eyeball them and count them that way. We also, as of about a month ago, finished a retrofit project on our fleet where we were able to ensure that every single bus now has automated passenger counters above every door. So they've got sensors above every door, and the articulators have 3 doors. Even the third door has it. So we are now getting live data from those sensors to give us ridership that's a little more accurate. We are working on the validation process for that equipment. It probably will go into probably spring 2023 before we are fully validated with those, and as far as the NTD reporting is concerned. But we're getting there, and but yes, we are capturing ridership for all doors.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Martin, very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Okay, now we're moving to new business. So at our last meeting, we were informed that the former vice chair was moving up to the board of directors and therefore created a vacancy. At that moment, we did not have a process for filling the vice chair person's position. So that was what this discussion this evening was, to actually, let me be clear what I'm saying. The last meeting, it was suggested that we get nominations for a vice chairperson at this meeting to vote on. Now, Whitney, did we get any nominations?
Did not receive any.
I received an informal nomination, which I will put forward, which was from Bonnie O'Day, who is no longer on this thing, but she nominated Jim Dunham to be vice chair. I don't know what the protocol is, since she isn't here to put your name in nomination, but I guess
She asked if she could do that.
in.
She went in tonight, but she had out of town guests.
So happy to put your name in nomination if you are willing to accept that nomination.
I guess it needs a second.
Come
So.
on, it needs a second. All right. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Congratulations. Now,
I want my name noted for the.
the
Yeah, right. Yeah, you want
No,
What does that mean?
No, I just want to clarify, which you heard the discussion with Josh as we began this meeting, which is this term will run through March, which is the end of the normal term of both my term as chair and the former vice chair's term, now Jim's term. And then at that meeting, we will have again, another nomination process and election for new officers, assuming Jim and I decided we're even staying, moving forward. So that's the cycle from the original formation of the committee and its first meeting, which was March of 2021. It's hard to believe. We finally made it here in person. Okay. One other thing I want to do before we get to the schedule for the 2023 meetings is Josh asked in an email to me, which Whitney was copied on, about doing a meet and greet with the DAC members with the dashboard. I sort of punted on that a little bit because I wanted to have a discussion with the group about how you felt about doing that and what is a convenient time. Tentatively, we talked about November. I don't know whether that's kind of close now. I don't know if people's schedules would allow for that. What's the date of the meeting in November? Do you remember, of the board?
I will have to get back to you guys. I don't.
Okay,
know the date.
but
Likely the 9th.
yeah, I think that sounds right to me.
Yes, that's right.
Now, the other possibility would be, I can't remember, does the board meet in December or they take, yeah, we could do a December meeting. Or we could even do January. So I'm just going to give you the 3 possibilities of what works best for your calendars. And may I suggest, if you would just give Whitney your preference for which of those dates works best for you. We will arrange for a little meet and greet and maybe, 5 or 10 minutes for people to just go around the room to say why they think their participation on this is important and what they've gotten out of it. I think the board would probably benefit from hearing that. That work for you, Whitney?
Yes.
Okay. So 2023 meeting schedule.
Okay, so based off of what we decided for this year, the first meeting could take place on January the 4th, which is a Wednesday. So typically we have these meetings on Wednesdays. There was some scheduling conflicts, which is why we had the meeting on a Thursday today. But typically these meetings are on Wednesdays on the first month of each quarter. And so I would ask you all to let me know about January the 4th, which is the first Wednesday in January. And then April the 5th, which is the first Wednesday in April.
Which according to my calendar says Passover.
Okay,
So it's a question of what people want to do with that.
Can I propose Thursday, April 6th?
You want to look at April 6th again, we'll move it one day.
okay. And then, excuse me, I have Wednesday for July is the 5th, which is the day after July 4th. So we can try for the 6th, but I know that week is normally not great for people. I'm open to maybe the 12th, which is the following Wednesday. Is that the preference?
Some of us are on the Alexandria Transportation Commission, and we meet the 3rd Wednesday of every month. So is that the second one?
That is the second
Okay,
Wednesday.
that's fine.
Okay.
Which is the same day as the board meeting.
It's the same day as the board meeting.
Oh, well, maybe that's our meet and greet.
I think that's a little too far for, I think what Josh would like to see.
We could also try the 13th, which would be the day after that board meeting.
Okay, I will work for that.
Okay, let's do that. So that would be Thursday, July 13th. And then the final meeting, final regularly scheduled meeting for next year. Let's see. Is there still a conflict for Wednesday in October? That would be October the 4th.
Good, looks good.
It works for everyone? Okay.
So you'll confirm these?
I will confirm these. They'll be included in the minutes, so
Okay.
everyone will be able to refer back to them.
Could we also in the when you send out the minutes with the dates, could you just give us a new roster since we have had some changes on this committee with,
I just asked the question about January 4th. I know the 2nd is the holiday because it's the New Year's Day observed. I wonder if people travel that week or be out of town. I don't have any plans, but just want to raise that if you guys think based on past experience, that's a tough week to schedule, kind of like the July 4th.
The first, yes.
I can ask a question, how long are the meetings usually?
2 hours?
2 hours.
So we're 5 minutes over our normal.
Is there a way we could aim for an hour and a half? That might.
That is typically the aim.
Yeah, okay.
It just kind of seems like because we have so much to talk about,
Right.
when we do meet, it ends up being 2 hours. But I think our last meeting actually ran about an hour and a half.
I think that might help get more participation. I know we all have day jobs and. Of course, this is not available by bus line either, ironically.
Well, I will tell you that Josh has said he'd be happy to send a dash vehicle
That's
for
funny.
those who are inconvenienced in getting here. So I will, for those who would like transportation to the headquarters here, we'll be happy to arrange that.
Not far from Duke Street, yeah.
Okay, any other, I realize we have run
I'm
long.
sorry, I wanted to confirm.
Sorry.
The 4th, are we,
What?
is the consensus to
Do
try
we want
and
to just move
adjust
it to
that
the 5th?
Sure.
to the 5th, or we can move?
Oh, of July or?
Well, I'm
No,
good
it's
on
talking about
the-
January.
To me, it's just really the question of that whole week, which goes through the 7th. If people are typically on vacation, from what I see, but not in government, private sector, like a lot of people do end up taking off. I just don't know. I mean, I'm personally, I can die anywhere. It doesn't really matter to me that much, but yeah.
Anybody have an objection to January 4th? Let's stick with it. Okay, I'm gonna take the liberty of the chair and suggest that unless there's some pressing issue in the open forum, that we take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Wait a minute. Oh, sorry.
I do just have one quick announcement, just to make sure that
Please.
everyone is aware that thanks to the feedback of everyone in this group, and of course, the internal staff as well, we will be launching the new website this coming Sunday.
Yay.
Could we, I just complained about the length, I know, but could we take maybe a tour before the next meeting? I'm new to this. I think that would be fascinating, or.
Yeah, I mean, for whatever it's worth for me, Beth, who I believe is Josh's assistant, reached out and offered to set one up before. I just couldn't do it today because I had another call, but she's been really nice and very flexible about trying to set something up.
The problem is if we do a tour, I'm all for it.
Right.
Just bear in mind, it's just gonna add to the time of the meeting.
Well,
We're
we
gonna have
could
a
be
lot
more
on the
efficient
agenda.
with the rest of our time.
Also, just so everyone knows, you all
Yeah,
are
talk
welcome
about-
to tour. It doesn't have to be as a group.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be on a meeting day, so I'm
Sure.
happy to
Okay.
figure out how to schedule you all for whenever it works.
They'll customize a tour for you. How's that?
Yes.
Highly recommend you volunteer for the rodeo.
Rodeo, okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Do I have a motion for adjournment? So moved. Second?
Second.
All right. We're adjourned. Thank you all for
Thank you.
this first successful hybrid meeting.
So it's a
I'm all in favor of
competition
doing it
with,
an hour and a half,
I forget
believe
how
me.
many other
Oh,
transit
yeah, no.
agencies,
This
but
is
they
what
have
I
it
said
here,
when I first-
and they set up obstacles, and it's drivers competing against drivers
Oh,
on
no way.
safety,
That's really
safety,
cool.
speed, efficiency, you name it. And I was able to judge and like with a clipboard and
Yeah.
everything, like right up next to the driver. And then we'd have like a rider judge in the back.
Wow.
And we all had different grading criteria, and it was a full day. I mean, I probably logged 6-7 hours in a bus,
Wow.
but it was the coolest thing.
Yeah, that's like really interesting.
Because these drivers, they are competitive.
We do, yeah.
Around some of them for decades, this competition.
We appreciate your.
Like there's a rival.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, it's drivers from different systems. Okay, that's cool. Yeah.
It's Really?
Yeah.
This is really neat because it
You need
touches
to
on
get
everything.
from Jim.
Also, they're really good
is-
about, you know,
Yes,
saying,
that
you know,
I will
like, fun.
follow up with them.
Agency has almost all electric. So if you want to talk maintenance about electric and learn about electric, they're the people that are actually doing it,
Yeah,
you know? So I mean, it's really
That's
cool.
pretty hard.
yeah, that's really neat.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Yeah, good to see you.
thanks again for everything. Yeah.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
What part did you judge?
Yeah.
Jason? What part did you judge? I was at the rodeo, but I just like came here.
Oh, no, so
Thank you.
so I judge the drivers.
Yeah.
So,
Join
and
us.
so I just
Yeah,
sat
you in the bus?
in the bus
Oh,
every time, yeah.
wow.